In this lecture, I'm going to talk to you about gestures and movement. Let's start with gestures. Your gestures needs to be natural and needs to be in line with what you are saying. You also don't want to be overusing the same gesture. So once you video record yourself, you'll be familiar with what you normally do on a regular basis. So you might have what I call the DJ hands, or the nervous itch, or flustering with your clothes as you speak. These are all gestures, by the way, and it's the small things that you need to pay attention to and learn what is your natural gesture and whether or not it's coming across as being distracting. Now, to use your hands, you are needing to learn to use your hands that make sense for the message that you are talking about. So if you are saying it was this high, then that makes sense. Or it was so short. Or it was round. Or we found them over there. When you are pointing, never point with your finger. Always use an open hand gesture. Let's now look at some specific gestures that mean certain things regardless of the audience that you're speaking to. Gesture number 1. You have the open hand gesture, which looks something like this. You're drawing your audience into your message, and this sort of looks very natural and very friendly. If you are doing this gesture, the bigger your audience, the bigger the gesture. So if it's a small boardroom, small group of people, it looks something like that. A big stage and your hands go wider. You don't want to be doing what is called chicken hands, where your hands look something like this. You almost want to make sure that your hands are away from your body, and so you have this type of look. That's gesture number 1. Gesture number 2 is what is known as a sword. That's where you're putting your finger in the air to illustrate that something is important. So it looks something like this. This is a critical point. So as you do that, as you've seen me do it now, you're not waggling your finger and you're not pointing at anyone. It's just a quick pause in the air and then your hand is down. Done. It's called the sword gesture. Let's look at the third gesture. At times when you are speaking to your audience, you might be thinking about something and contemplating something that your audience has said or a question that has been posed to you. So it's okay now and then just to stroke your chin or stroke your cheek. It's okay. It shows that you are thinking. Then the final gesture that I like to talk to you about is known as the sovereign. This is almost as if you are caressing silk. So it looks like this, either with your right hand or with your left hand. So it looks something like this is not negotiable. You could do 2 hands. This is not negotiable. When you're coming to the outer ends, you're not going right to the sides, you're ending off in this 90-degree angle. This is not negotiable, or this is not negotiable. Finally, as a speaker, you are allowed to have unusual poses. These are times in your speech when perhaps you are talking about your story or you're illustrating and you're demonstrating a fact. So you can go into like a weird pose, to say, I don't know what happened. I was confused at the time. So you get into these weird vocal varieties together with the gesture to indicate what you were going through at that moment. Let's now look at movement on the stage. Now when it comes to movement, you don't want to be what I call a stage creeper, where you are walking like this, as if you are so scared to speak, and one leg is sort of crossing the other as you are speaking, because it comes across as if you are too shy and too timid. And you also don't want to be shuffling your feet as you walk from one end to the other. So how do you bring about movement? The rule is that your movement must be natural. As you would normally walk is how you walk on the stage. So if you're going to walk forward, you walk forward. If you're walking back, you walk back. You're walking to the side, and so you do so. And so your gestures and your movements needs to be as natural as possible. This is why it's important for you to consider the shoes that you wear on the day of your presentation and that you're comfortable walking around in it. Before we move on, I want to talk to you about standing still and moving on a stage. If you're a newbie speaker, I would highly suggest that you first learn to stand still as a speaker. You heard me, stand still. Not robot style, not like where you are so robotic and tense, but standing still, but you can still use your hand gestures and use vocal variety in the course of your talk, but you're not using movement. Movement is a very complicated piece to add in after you've learned how to script your talk, after you've learned how to stand in front of your audience, how to manage your energy, how to eliminate your crutch words, how to bring in vocal variety, and how to have eye contact. Once you have those things in place, then bring in movement. Because if you bring in movement too soon, then a few things can go wrong. Your eye contact, not getting the right words, not showing the confidence. So just please remember to bring in movement last. Remember that standing still is power. The power must come from the words that you are saying and from the power of your voice. And that's really the lecture on tonality. You can be a very powerful force by learning to stand still and choosing your words carefully. So when you do learn to move on a stage, you're moving with purpose after you have got all the other foundational aspects in place. So you would move forward if you want to arrive at an important point, or you'd move forward to arouse the audience's attention. You would move backward to get into your story space, or you'd move backward if you want to show something in your story like, oh, wow, that was like a surprise to me. You would move sideways, again, if you want to transition from your timeline being from your past to your future, or your future back to pain, if you remember the earlier lecture in this course. And you'd move sideways if you want to connect from this side of the audience to the other side of the room. At the end of the day, the movement must make sense for what you are saying and for what purpose you are deriving. Now that we've got gestures and movement in place, let's go to the next lecture now.